Hello dear viewers and welcome to the third and final part of the complete Vokrii guide. If you're not sure what's going on, watch the first video, link in the description. Generally speaking, Vokrii is a perk overhaul for Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, and we are going almost perk by perk, possibly skipping some most boring or most vanilla-like ones. This time we need to talk about the magic skills, and they are rather interesting. Warrior perks can open up new build options or improve some existing builds. Stealth perks can make your combat archers better, and even pickpocket and lockpicking skills are made into something worth perking at times. But it seems to me, at least, the mage skills underwent the most impactful changes. For example, Alteration is now a skill that most mage builds should have at least a few perks in. It is a hub for all the mages, and we need to start this analysis by talking about Alteration. But before that, a little side remark. In my experience, if your main problem with Skyrim mage characters is simply that they aren't powerful enough, Vokrii and Summer Mist are quite enough to fix it. Another mod to consider is Odin Magic Overhaul, which has a compatibility patch for Vokrii. These three mods work wonders together, so I may mention all of them, even though the video is about Vokrii specifically. So, Alteration. All the vanilla perks, already quite important for all pure mages like mage armor, stability or magic resistance, are still here, but we get a few major improvements. Above the mage armor we have Okato's Preparation. It casts your best armor spell like Iron Flesh or Ebony Flesh at the start of each combat at no cost in magic and without any action needed. It is a great asset for all mages, but it also makes playing an unarmored spellsword or battle mage considerably easier. You could have a character for whom the flesh or armor spells are literally the only spells they cast, and otherwise they play like warriors or archers. You could say that 5 perks required to make magic armor reliable on higher difficulties is a high price to pay, but you also need quite a few perks in armor skills and possibly in smithing to reach peak efficiency and regain full mobility with armors. Meanwhile, when you're not wearing any armor, you can sneak successfully without perks in sneak, and you move around rather fast from day one. Another wonderful perk for this sort of build and for pure mages is Sorcerer's Robes, which only requires 40 in the skill Mastery and 1 rank in Mage Armor. It makes all your spells from all schools 25% better. If you are using Summer Mist enchantments, the perk goes well with the Amplify Magic School effects. Also, the Fortify Magic Skills potions do increase the effectiveness of spells, so you can create a very deadly Destruction Mage with this Alteration perk, 2 perks in alchemy, and 1 or 2 amplify effects on your clothes and jewelry. Then we have the Initiate perk, which makes all your novice spells free to cast. This is not very interesting for pure mages, as they will most likely have plenty of magicka and reduce the cost of their most used spells, and also stop using novice spells as soon as possible. But for certain hybrids, this perk can be just what you need to focus on the warrior part of your build and use magic as an extra support. There are also spell mods adding some very interesting novice spells, like Ghost Walk spell from Apocalypse. Also, even without any extra spells or mods, the vanilla flames with some fortified destruction potions can get rather powerful if you stack its afterburn effect on a target. The perk makes this technique cost free. Then we have Force of Will, which will reduce incoming attack damage when you dual cast a spell. This is not very interesting for weapon users, of course, but if you have a lot of magicka and some dual casting perks, you can pair this perk with the Dragon Hide spell and you will be pretty much immune to physical damage when dual casting. Slightly up and to the left there is a 100 perk called Ritualist, which allows you to move when casting ritual spells, so the master spells that require both hands like Firestorm. They will be slightly less effective if cast while moving, but that's what alchemy is for, and amplify destruction is for, and a few other things possibly. If you would rather go with a spell and a weapon, on the right hand side of the tree we have 2 ranks of Battle Mage. Your spells will become up to 30% better against an enemy you hit with a weapon in the last 3 seconds. This is a considerable boon for this specific playstyle, especially again with some fortified destruction potions and a Dragon Priest mask, for example, relevant to your most used destruction element. Right above magic resistance we have another universally useful perk, Alter Self. First rank will let you increase one of your attributes by 25 points. It used to be 50, but it was nerfed. You may use it to improve your key attribute, but for some hybrid builds it's often better to put it into your less developed attribute. Like if you are a spellsword aiming for a few expensive spells, Alter Self could be used to increase stamina, not magicka, because you will probably have some magic increasing effects on your apparel anyway, and maybe in some other forms. Meanwhile, well, 45 stamina may just not make it into your loadout. The second rank is also a good fixer-upper for hybrid builds, since you may face hard choices in terms of enchantments on your gear with those builds, and sometimes you may be unable to place elemental resistances on your items. Well, the second rank of Alter Self offers 25 resistance to one of the three elements, or poison or disease. Mages who would like to use most of their slots for Fortify Magic school effects should take shock resistance here to protect their magicka pool. Then up the branch we have Arcane Guidance, which increases the range of detection of spells, which isn't all that great, especially that Aura Whisper exists, but for some stealth archers, maybe some very tactical builds that require planning ahead, it can be quite helpful. Mostly though we take it because it is a prerequisite to Headhot's Escape, which will paralyze an enemy about to deal a killing blow to you. It has a 10-minute cooldown, but it is just about enough, and if you pair it with the Intervention perk in Restoration, your ability to survive against the gravest odds will improve dramatically. An undying, undefeated mage is just one build made possible by the new Alteration perks, and especially with some new Restoration perks combined with that, I mean. All hybrid and pure mages will get stronger, some problems typical to hybrid builds will be offset, a build relying exclusively on dual casting or ritual spells will be much easier to pull off, especially with certain Summer Mist enchantments. My favorite perks by a long mile are the Telekinesis perks. They are the most, well, amusing. We have the Telekinetic Force, 2 ranks, which can increase the damage you deal by throwing objects with Telekinesis spell by up to 500 points. It's 500. It works best with the slow time shout because it becomes much easier to aim with the objects you throw this way. It requires a little bit of practice unless doing it at point blank range. Slow time mode will also give you enough time to throw something at a single target several times in a row before they can attack you. Enough to effortlessly kill a bandit marauder with a sweet roll. Above that we have the Telekinetic Prodigy perk, which allows you to use telekinesis to lift and throw people and creatures. I don't think I need to explain why this is awesome. What I like about the way Vokrii handles this idea is balance. At least there is a serious attempt at making it balanced. You can only do it with a very late game perk, which requires 2 other perks. But actually 3, as it won't work without dual casting. Dual casting telekinesis is also very costly in terms of magicka, so you may be forced to use a few Fortify Alteration enchantments if you want to use this technique often. Now Restoration, another one that opens up a lot of new options. It has a branch, maybe my favorite branch, that seems to be dedicated to the builds like a pilgrim with a religious sort of background and roleplay, but not much perk points to spend on magic skills. It starts with Inner Light, which has 2 ranks, each increasing your magicka regeneration by 1 or 2% of your total magicka. This is wonderful for a character using spells sparsely and mostly low-level spells. If you are mostly a mage, you would have some other magicka regeneration effects to stack with it, most likely. Above that we have Blessed, a perk that definitely should have existed in the vanilla game in some shape or form. Pity it requires as much as 80 in Restoration. It makes all shrine blessings 50% stronger, which is very nice indeed, especially that blessing of Akatosh pairs nicely with Inner Light. But if you are going to use this perk, I urge you to combine it with St. Alicia's Worship in Wintersun Faiths of Skyrim mod, which will not only further improve the blessings of the 9 divines, but also let you switch between them on the fly, which can create a very versatile and powerful build. I think I have 1 or 2 that uses this technique. The Prophet I will put some links in the description. No worries, I'm sure I won't forget about them. No. And at the end of the branch we have Intervention, which is a better version of Avoid Death vanilla perk. Once in 30 minutes you will be brought back to life with full HP after you are slain. If you can, get the Hedgehog's Escape in Alteration too, and now you have 2 different ways of negating death itself. You munchkin, you Mary Sue. Another branch is for Inspiring Figures, as it starts with the Inspire perk. It heals your allies within 15 feet by up to 10 points per second. There is an enchantment in Summer Mist that works similarly, so with some courage spells and St. Alicia's Blessing, you can really focus on support and just watch your friends slaughter your enemies. Above that, we have good old Necromage. It works like it does in vanilla, even with the unofficial patch, so vampires can be OP again. Yay! Make vampires OP again! Woo. Then to the left we have the Ward branch, which actually makes these seldomly used spells an interesting option. Vigilant. Ward will reduce incoming damage when you have your ward up by up to 60% and reduce the cost by up to 80%. Then we have good old Ward Absorb, and above that we have Mage Ward, another one to pair with Alteration perks, Force of Will to be more precise. Mage Ward will raise a ward whenever you dual cast a spell, and that ward can negate up to 200 magic damage and benefit from other ward perks, but with decreased efficiency, so it can also negate 30% incoming physical damage when dual casting any spell, while Force of Will negate another 20%. Finally, we have perks devoted to healing and sun spells. Mercy is an interesting one. It encourages a little bit of a risk, as the healing spells you cast will be more effective on targets below half health, including yourself. This is quite effective for high health builds like a Crusader, who will have an easier time timing the heal with the health loss. It will let you keep using low-level healing spells for the entirety of your playthrough. Above the familiar Respite perk we have the Eternal Flame, which will heal you 2 times over. First the original HP amount and then the same amount another time, except this time over 20 seconds. If you can combine this with some good health regeneration increase like the Troll's Blood spell from Odin, you will become even more unkillable even without any high-level healing spells. Harm makes healing spells you cast on enemies deal damage to them instead of healing. This is a gorgeous perk for paladins, but also for restoration mages that may struggle to spare perk points to put them in distraction. It combines famously and fabulously with Wild Healing spell from Apocalypse, as the spell will heal you and then bounce to a random nearby target. With Harm, if the target is hostile, it will deal damage instead of healing them. It is a novice spell, so with the Initiate Alteration perk you can also cast it for free. It's a very cheesy combo. I believe it is familiar to the Ordinator users, not exactly Vokrii specific, a rather old one but a very good one. I almost forgot about 2 rather important restoration perks. First is the Sun's Judgment, which will make the sun spells such as Vampire's Bane or Stendar's Aura deal damage to all kinds of enemies, not just the undead, and this is very useful for all kinds of restoration mages that would like to avoid perking destruction for whatever reason. Now the elemental destruction spells will still be ultimately able to deal more damage, of course, because there is a few ways now, a few more than in vanilla, to build up its damage, but this is an option for someone who would like to avoid perking destruction for whatever reason. And then there is Rebuke Undead perk, which will instantly destroy all the weakened undead, weakened as in at 30% health or lower, and all the stronger undead will be set ablaze by the turn undead spells. So this is something very useful for all sort of Crusaders and anti-undead builds. But now a distraction. Every element gets an extra perk, and the Impact perk is sadly nerfed. But the Cloaks and Wall spells get some extra abilities. It is quite sad, but Impact now only has a 30% chance to stagger when dual cast. With fast projectile spells like Chain Lightning, it is still a decent crowd control tool, but if you have to choose, it's usually better to prioritize the opposite branch to enhance your cloak, spells and runes. Rune Master now has 2 ranks, but it will not only increase the range at which the runes can be placed, but also improve their damage by up to 20%, which isn't all that much for 2 perk points, but may be attractive to characters specializing in runes. One step higher, we have a rather useful Headhod's Disjunction, which makes the cloak spells apply 25% weakness to their respective element. Imagine this with some weakness to magic, poisons and the Sorcerer's Robe's Alteration perks. You can really build up a lot of extra damage for your elemental spells and enchantments this way. At the destruction value of 80, you can improve your cloak spells by another 25% extra damage and make them linger for 5 seconds after an enemy leaves the range of your cloak. So now with the Sorcerer's Robes you have an extra 50% damage to your cloak spells and 25% weakness applies to all targets, and they can't escape the damage that easily. And with the Elemental Shield perk you will have 50% resistance to your cloak's element. This combines with so many things it could almost have its own little video. Obviously you can increase your resistance further with the 2nd rank of Alter Self. Obviously Dark Elves have a 50% resistance to fire and Nords to frost, so if they use a matching cloak spell constantly, they can reach the cap for that element without any other perks or items. If you use heavy armor, there is Elemental Defense perk, granting you another 15% resistance to all elements as long as you wear heavy armor. Incidentally, I think this perk is also perfect for a spell shield build, so a character with a shield and a spell, because of course there is Elemental Protection perk in block, so you can have a rather powerful build using all 3 elemental cloaks depending on the situation, and then with your shield raised you can cap your resistance to whatever element you need to resist at the time. For the element specific perks we still have the perks increasing the damage of course, but the extra effects against low health enemies have been altered, and sometimes profoundly so. Fire spells will not apply any extra fear anymore, they get the Devouring Flames perk, which increases the afterburn damage all fire spells have against low health enemies. Frost spells with the Chilling Frost perk will slow the attack speed, and that's rather rare of an effect, of low health enemies, as well as apply a bit of weakness to frost. Frost is now a go-to element for characters willing to build up some serious speed advantage, as evidenced by my Winterbow build and perhaps my Nightblade build and maybe some others. Maybe there will be links, sure I won't forget about them. Deafening Shock will silence enemies, preventing them from spellcasting and shouting. This is actually an interesting choice for hybrid characters wielding a mace and a shock spell, because maces can also silence enemies. Then we have new additional effects to our elemental spells. My personal favorite, Scorched Earth, will make enemies you kill with fire turn into a burning pile of ash that deals damage to anyone who walks over it. In tight spaces, when you are surrounded by many weaker enemies, it can cause a chain reaction of fire, especially satisfying and powerful when you use the Wall of Flames spell. Winter's Grasp will encase weakened enemies in ice, essentially paralyzing them. The Crackling Sphere perk will levitate weak enemies. They can still try to hit you or shoot at you, but it is usually rather difficult for them when they just fly up and then fall down and fly up again and fall down again and all that jazz. At the top of the tree we have Hellstorm, which will make your elemental spells deal 50% extra damage against enemies that are frozen, ignited, levitated or silenced, so basically affected by your elemental distraction perks. In my experience, the perk makes little difference if you are already buffing your spell damage with Fortified Distraction potions and or Amplified Distraction enchantments, but makes a significant difference if you don't. Especially on legendary difficulty, it makes every fight go by much faster. And before I forget, there is also the Raw Power perk, 3 ranks of it, which will increase the damage of non-elemental distraction spells. There isn't that many of non-elemental distraction spells without mods, but as of Anniversary Edition, you can find a few in Hobbs Fall Cave, and there is quite a few others in the remarkable Triumvirate mod. It will improve the attribute absorbing spells, which of course means more health for you and less for your enemies. Especially with the Triumvirate mod, you can have a build centered entirely around absorbing spells like my Sorcerer, link in the description. Well, the Sorcerer also uses poison spells, but you know, we know. Well, alright then, now for Conjuration. It is rather OP, but this is just what Vokrii does. This is the Vokrii's idea of balance, just make everything equally as OP. The Bound Weapon branch gets some extra perks. Your Atronax can grant you a buff to your elemental spells and enchantments. We now start off the Atronax summoning branch with Atromancy, and it has the skill requirement reduced to 30. Further up, we have a new one, Oblivion Stone, 2 ranks, which will improve the armor and magic resistance of your summoned Daedra and creatures. At 90, we can get an extremely useful perk of Elemental Conflux, which buffs you when a summoned Atronax is close. You get a 20% buff to the spells of matching element, and you get extra 50 elemental damage to your bound weapon. A wonderful perk for conjurers and conjurer hybrids alike. The Necromancy branch also has a few additions. The Dark Souls perk doesn't exist anymore, which is fine. 100 extra health doesn't do that much compared to what the new perks can do. We have the Ghoul Frenzy, which will increase both attack and movement speed of your raised zombies. Above that we have Blood Zombies, which grants both the raised and summoned undead a little health absorbing aura for 5 points per second. I would say these two perks are much better and then the flat health increase. And we get one more. At 19 Conjuration we can unlock the Necromaster. Cool name, by the way, which enhances the undead raised with Dread Zombie or Undead Thrall spells exclusively with extra health, magicka and stamina, and you can now give them weapons. This is rather convenient for necromancers because everyone who uses Dead Thrall would need to wait until the thrall is slain to customize their equipment, and if you can't cast a master level spell, you just can't customize anything except with this perk here. All the Necromancy branch except Necromaster are rather satisfying to use with the ritual stone stored in the Ethereal Crown, so that you can have an everlasting army of super fast health absorbing undead. Add the Azidal's ring to it and all your minions will also explode with ice when killed. There's also the Fortify Minions effect in Summer Mist and the power of the Master spell in Odin, and now you have a completely OP Necromancer build. I need one of those. I actually really need one of those. I have never made a pure Necromancer build. How odd. The Bound Weapons branch you would think didn't need a lot of enhancements. It is one of the most cost-effective ways of creating a decent fighter even in vanilla and very early in the game. Well, the mod author apparently disagrees because he added a few new options here. First off, there is the synergy with Elemental Conflux. Mystic Binding and Soul Stealer still do what they should be doing, but above Soul Stealer we get new options. Oblivion Binding not only banishes summoned Daedra on hit and rebukes raised undead, but now also deals extra 100 damage against all Daedra and raised undead. The completely new Hollow Binding will make an enemy you hit with a bound weapon 25% weaker to all magic. There is a perk in Illusion making enemies under the influence of calm spells 25% weaker to all magic as well, and there is the Battle Mage perk in Alteration. So here there's another build right there, a Battle Mage Conjuration, Alteration, Destruction, Illusion and one-handed focused on making a single target exceptionally weak to magic. Well then, some alchemy should be thrown into the mix too, I believe. Void Brand perk enhances your bound weapons with a rather interesting magic effect. This will drain magicka and stamina for 30 points each hit. When these attributes are depleted, it will drain health instead. This effect will be increased against targets you make weaker to magic with the aforementioned combos. Now, Illusion has been almost completely rebuilt and rebalanced in Vokrii. The perks enhancing a specific mind-affecting spell types are changed, and there is an extra perk for each spell type. Perks raising the max level of creatures affected by your illusions are combined into ranked Animage. Both animals and humanoids will be affected by Animage now, but in order to control minds of Daedra, undead and automatons you will need Master of the Mind, which is now split into 2 ranks, the first one being available as early as skill level 70. The first rank alone will have the duration decreased on those enemies, but it's still a much needed change for characters willing to rely mainly or solely on mind control. There are other perks dedicated to illusion-centric builds. For the Calm Calming spells, we have the Neverworld perk, which gives your calm spells a 50% chance to linger after they are broken, say by your attack. This often gives you enough time to dispatch a calmed enemy before they have a chance to react to your attacks. At illusion level 70, we get the Lamb to the Slaughter, which will mess your calmed enemies by reducing their armor by 100 points, which of course stacks with marks for death, for instance, and applying 25% weakness to magic. We already talked about many ways Vokrii offers to increase your spell effectiveness. There is this old vanilla technique of using calm spells to single out one enemy you want to defeat first, and it seems it gets much stronger in Vokrii. Then for the fear spells, we have the Terror perk, which really actually just causes affected enemies to drop their weapons, which is rather deadly against some types of enemies. Pity it doesn't work with fear enchantments, because you could then have a weapon disarming with every hit. I really wanted it to be a thing. It isn't. I guess the mod author thought about that. Another fear perk, Paralyzing Fear, can cause, in 1 out of 4 cases, the affected enemy to freeze in fear. Since terror is a prerequisite, they won't be able to fight for a while, even after the effect runs out, if they normally use a weapon for fighting, that is. Now, fury spells have always been my favorite. They tend to win battles for you if you improve the maximum effective level with perks and fortify illusion potions. These perks don't seem to need a lot of improvement, that's why Vokrii improves them a lot. Iron Maiden will make the infuriated enemies receive 20 points of damage each time they attack, and Enrage will make their attacks deal 50% more damage. Now, enraging the meanest, toughest SOB in the room tends to, well, have very funny results. They will most likely kill everything else. So if you have a not so rare situation when there is one bandit marauder with a scary two-hander and a couple of weaker bandits, just use basic fury on that marauder. It will be effective with all ranks of Animage and dual casting perk. Even further up the branch, we have 2 perks enhancing courage spells. I find it a little bit odd they require 4 other perks and illusion level of at least 60. Courage spells are exactly the kind of magic you would often like to improve without improving any other mind-affecting spells, because they suit so many supporter or leader character ideas. There isn't that many ways of enhancing these spells in vanilla, so maybe I'm just whining, but the Splendor perk should really be available right after taking Mastery, it seems, with the level requirement of 30 or 40. But at this point, Splendor requires 60 and has 4 prerequisite perks, and it enhances the rally effects with an extra 50 points buff to all 3 attributes for all affected allies. It is of course advised to increase this buff with vanilla means, so by dual casting the courage spells and drinking a Fortify Illusion potion beforehand. It is worth noting that the basic courage spell is a novice spell, so with the initiate perk in Alteration you can cast it for free. Its effects increase by mere 25 points, so the Splendor perk is a significant boon, since you can have extra 75 points of stamina and magicka for your follower for free. Now, that's not even counting potions or dual casting. If you have a low magicka hybrid character that uses illusion, alchemy and alteration, you should definitely keep that in mind. Also remember that Inspire perk in Restoration only needs 30 in that skill at least for the first rank, and has only 1 prerequisite perk, so you can have another boon for your followers for a very little effort. And another courage-related perk is the Spirit of War, which will create a ghostly apparition of allies affected by your courage spells. They will be weaker than those allies, of course, but sometimes an extra body or spirit, in this case, on the battlefield can make a difference. At the very top of the tree we have the Mind Thrall, which is just fantastic. It allows you to turn anyone affected by your mind control spells into your permanent thrall. You can only have 1 at a time, but they don't count towards the follower limit or to the summoning limit, so it can be very, very powerful. That poor marauder that just slaughtered all his friends and now tries to go after you can just be activated and wabam! He is your best friend forever now, or until you find a better friend. Also, quiet casting now has less prerequisite perks, and it only requires mastery, and above it we have blur, which currently makes you move 15% faster when invisible. The source of invisibility is irrelevant. It may be a potion, it may be a power, it may be the ring of Khajiit, it may be a lot of things. But Enchanting may be one of the most, if not the most interesting skill tree in the mod. Not just because it's OP, but also because it turns the skill into a hub for all builds relying on magic items, staffs, scrolls, even the so-called spider scrolls. The skill will now level up when using staffs, which makes the grind more diverse and less, well, grindy. Let's start with the least interesting perks though. We still have Soul Squeezer and Soul Siphon. They are crammed on the leftmost branch of the tree, but the branch is now crowned with a Thunderstruck, which makes the enchantments on your weapons 50% stronger when delivered by a power attack. It is nice by itself, but if you have a spell sword or a battle mage using Hedhos Disjunction and Sorcerer's Robes and Battle Mage perk, while being able to power attack often, your effective damage of your elemental enchantments will be more than doubled on power attacks. This perk gets even more interesting when using Summer Mist enchantments, because some of these enchantments require of you to build up a curse with repeated attacks for a certain effect to fire up. Like, in order to fling an enemy away with a Threshold Throw enchantment, you need to hit them repeatedly, with each hit adding to a special hidden value. When a certain threshold is reached, the enemy is blown away. Thunderstruck allows you to do it faster. There is many more Summer Mist enchantments that should make you consider Thunderstruck, but this is a video about Vokrii, not Summer Mist, so let's move on. The next branch to your right is for staff users, and it starts off with 3 ranks of Power Stone, which can increase the power of your equipped staff by up to 50%, and it will make the enchantments on your weapon held in the other hand stronger by up to 50% as well. This perk should also make you consider Thunderstruck if you have Gandalf-like staff and weapon build. Further up, we have the Mana Stone, which will simply make you spend half the normal amount of charges when using a staff, and also when attacking with an enchanted weapon in your other hand. Further up, we have the Mana Stone, which will simply make you spend half the normal amount of charges when using a staff, and also when attacking with an enchanted weapon in your other hand. Not the most glorious perk, but it is a prerequisite to Mana Shield, which makes you ignore 25% of physical attack damage when wielding a staff. Combine that with the Dragon Hide spell and you will hardly feel a hit of a Daedric Warhammer. And then we also have Staff Recharge, which will simply slowly recharge your stuff, eliminating or at least greatly reducing the need to recharge it with soul gems. This is quite useful, but only for some specific builds. If you rely a lot on a unique staff like the Staff of Hasedoki, for example, or the Staff of Magnus, you may consider this perk, because of course you will never have a spare staff of the same kind. If you don't trap souls yourself, because maybe you don't want to increase Conjuration or your roleplay idea bans it, you could also use this. On the opposite side of the tree we have the Scroll branch with 3 ranks of Scroll Sage as the first and probably most impactful perk. All 3 ranks of it will make your scrolls 200% more effective than normal. The spells you cast from scrolls are affected by Fortified Destruction potions as much as any standard spell of that school, so you can build up hundreds upon hundreds of damage on, say, Firestorm scroll if you perk both Alchemy and Enchanting. You don't even need to go very high on the skill trees. You need 2 perks in Alchemy and 2 or 3 ranks of this perk and you are now a real scroll killer, as in you kill by scrolls, not you kill scrolls. That would be silly. Obviously, scrolls are rather expensive normally. Raiding Apocrypha does tend to yield a lot of useful scrolls though, and there are scroll crafting mods. And above Scroll Sage there is Scroll Hunter perk in this very mod, giving you a 10% chance to find a random scroll on corpses of enemies you have slain. It doesn't look like much, but considering how powerful your scrolls can become, anything more than that would probably be an overkill, as if it isn't already. Above that we have the Spider Hunter, which offers a 5% chance to find a a spider scroll on corpses. This may be attractive only to some very obscure builds heavily focused on items and crafting. My Artificer is the only build I played I would consider this perk for. More often than not, Scroll Sage will be everything you need on this branch. The main actually enchanting perks in the middle are also altered. They no longer enhance certain type of enchantment, instead they improve enchantments placed on certain type of objects. Weapon Enchanter makes enchantments on newly enchanted weapons stronger, Armor Enchanter does the same for armor, and Regalia does it for rings, necklaces and circlets. There is also Soul Enchanter, which grants you extra 1000 points of charge for newly enchanted items. This is important again only for builds relying specifically on weapon enchantments. If you perk enchanting just for the extra effect, like most sane people do, taking armor and regalia enchanter perks beforehand is usually enough. All in all, Vokrii magic skills can make some builds that would underperform in vanilla much stronger. The mod can make even the weirdest concepts viable, and even more so for magic builds. I've made all kinds of magic hybrids with Vokrii, including a Witchhunter and a Nightblade, which can be somewhat challenging in vanilla. I experienced no problems. Alteration and Enchanting seem to be the most creative, opening up the most new options, and if you add a little bit of alchemy to them, you are just a god. Skyrim magic system seems to rely on cross-skill synergy in vanilla already, which is why people sometimes complain about it, but Vokrii doesn't complain about it, and instead it cranks it up to 9000. And now my watch has ended. We went through every skill, highlighted the most interesting perks, we pointed out many of the possible synergies both within Vokrii itself and with other mods. Hopefully you can find it useful in your adventures, and maybe like this video, share and comment, or support my channel through subscribe, star, or the new weird button under my videos, super thanks, yes, super thanks. It's a tip, it's a tip button. It's like super chats, but there's no chat, just money. Yes, actually making of this video was an extremely tiresome and long-winded enterprise, and I would very much appreciate it if you could drop a little tip, if you could give me a little pat on the back so I can make more videos like this, or even longer videos. That would be scary. Okay, anyway, I hope we will see each other again, and bye.